Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can actually join us in Zoom by clicking on the little link below. From there, you can join us in Mokana by click the little link in there, and you'll end up in a place where you can actually ask questions and drive the show. You become one of the producers. The show is completely driven by a very fascinating interaction between the panelists and the producers who are watching, not passively. So that's the big thing here, is that it really the whole show depends on all of you watching and on the panelists here. So definitely ask questions in Mukana, vote on those questions. We're now growing to a size that we may or may not be able to get to all the questions by the end of the hour. So your vote really matters. So voting questions up and down, so that different, we really stack them up in the order in which you want to discuss them, is super important. So definitely use the voting tool for the future as we move forward. Now, if you think you can answer some of the questions and contribute back to the group, then please jump on the panel. You just need to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Raise your digital hand. It's also when we hand out the Discord link. People sometimes ask, how do I get the Discord link? Well, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We put it into Mukana. That's how you join. And so if, the best part of the panel is it's always changing. If you think, especially on certain days or just days that you're available, that you can make it, we'd love to have you. We open the doors at 6 o'clock. If you're not sure if your kit will be ready for this, or if you haven't done it and you want to test it, you'll see us talking about all kinds of stuff. But you can feel free to interrupt us and ask us if we can make sure that things look and sound good. If you have any questions about your system and you want someone just to kind of talk about it. So that's a good time to do it. First hour is general questions. Any questions general questions around media production, virtual production, etc. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. So Alex Gollner, who's here today with us, he put together an incredible motion file for the Mad in the Kitchen. And when I saw it, I was like, more people should see this. It's like a master's course in motion. So Alex is going to join us and kind of walk us through it and answer questions about it. It's really a cool file. So it'll be a very cool second hour. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the future of broadcast. We've talked a little bit about events, but where is broadcast going? No, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. And then Friday, we're going to talk about Jeff Keithley. One Up Jeff is going to come and talk to us a little bit about and brainstorm with Guy and whoever. Tucker may be able to make it. We'll see. What would it look like for us to do Mad in the Kitchen completely in the cloud? We're going to start doing R&D around that, and we're going to just brainstorm about what that would look like. So that should be a fun Friday. And what would it take? What are the challenges? How do we put it together? We're going to be doing testing where we actually try to, by the end of the season, be ready to do it all in the cloud. So we'll see how that goes. Saturday, we of course have education. David Milan from Harvard University, who does CS50, is going to join us and talk about how they're moving forward with online classes and really all the tech that they're adding. We're pretty excited about having him on. Nick Justin from Drexel University is also going to join us at 10 o'clock to talk about metahumans in Unreal. He's been doing a lot of work in that area, so we're going to shift that around a little bit, and he's going to talk from 10 to 11:30. We'll discuss it with all of you and answer your questions. MetaHumans is, by the way, free. You can download it if you just search for MetaHumans. Someone can put it in Mukana. But I would highly recommend downloading. It takes a little bit of time to get it, but I would play with it. It's just good, clean fun. Like, it doesn't even if you're not going to do anything with Unreal immediately, building, like being able to put together and kind of structure a CG person is pretty slick. And then remember at 5 o'clock we'll have the doors really open at 4. But at 5 o'clock, we'll do a cook along again with Mad in the Kitchen. Damayanti, who a lot of us cooked with a couple weeks back, is going to actually be our guest chef, and so we should have a lot of fun. Again, it's the sign up for that is in the email that all of you get every morning. It's a lot of fun, even if you're just watching. So I would highly recommend people get up there and cook. We're also trying to figure out who will be on the show in the future. So, along with as the featured cook-alongs. And so that's a good place to do that. And then after the show, just remember that when you're scheduling yourself after the show at 6 o'clock or 6:30, we immediately go into a technical breakdown of what happened. What worked, what didn't work. There was a lot that didn't work in the first one. And so we'll talk all about those things. And so it's a really great way to learn broadcast and talk about it. You can actually watch the cooking, take part in the cooking, or sit back and watch the production and see and listen to the comms and look at the multi views. So it's kind of a fun way to learn production just by experiencing it. All right, let's get into the questions. Guy, what do we got first?
First one's coming in from Tlaloc, Miguel Lopez Waterman, our friend in New York.
And just as a note, we're bringing some of these in from yesterday. We didn't even. It's not even that we tried. We were so busy going through the mics and we ran so far over, we didn't even touch them. So a couple of these are coming in from yesterday. We'll just go through them relatively quickly. Go ahead.
Okay, he says, I have been listening more carefully than I ever have, and on some people I hear a gravelly sound at the higher frequencies. Is this a factor of the preamp, the mic, or Zoom? Thought it might be the way I was listening, but I don't hear it on Alex or Guy.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim, and then Mickey.
Sorry for the delay. Had my cursor in the wrong spot. I suspect it's a combination of mic, environment, and whatever Zoom is doing to it. Preamps operated within their linear range do not color sound and should not be doing that. No, not to say they won't, but they shouldn't.
You go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if I'm not entirely sure what you mean by gravelly sound, just in case it's a distortion, it might be something in your monitoring chain. But if it's not, it's mostly affected by how a specific voice interacts with a specific mic and how that signal interacts with your specific monitoring system, like your whatever earphones or in-ears or whatever you're using to listen.
And there's definitely way people talk. You can have more of this in your voice if and some people do that naturally, and some people just turn it on. But so you can. It could be just a function of just the way the voice is working as well. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was miking a professional talent or a singer, Harry Belafonte, years ago, and I thought my microphone was bad. And I put the lav on him and I checked in my cans and it sounded horrible. And I changed the battery, changed the mic to backup mic. And then I walked up to him to change it again. And he looked at me and he started talking. He goes, "What seems to be the problem?" And I went,
"Oh, it's his voice." Yeah.
"Oh,
yeah.
As a matter of fact, there's no problem at all. I apologize. We're ready to roll."
Yeah.
And I walked away. His voice just
cracks.
Weird stuff in it. Yeah.
Yep. Next question.
Next one's also from Tlaloc. What is the cleanest way to deal with background noise? Could Mickey say whether he runs with original sound on or off?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, the best way to deal with background noise, and this is a sort of a do as I say kind of thing, because I have my AC running and I keep Orjo sound turned off. Best way to deal with it is work with physics. Seal yourself off as much as you can. We had a few sessions previously with George who talked about treating a room and soundproofing, and also dealing with reflections in a room. About if I can say if Orjo sound is on or off, if I know a mic is capable of picking up, a certain kind of frequency range. Like, say, for example, I know Chris Ritchie has a very good mic, a DPA 4066, but he keeps Orjo sound off because of the other noise that's happening in his room. He mentioned it's his lights with fans on. So I would try to chase down those additional frequencies if possible, and I would ask people to turn Orjo sound on. But if I hear that the noise is a little too overpowering, then I'd ask them to turn it back off. And I could also say if Orjo sound is off, if I can tell if noise suppression is trying to work hard. You could hear frequencies get cut off, especially with the more affordable mics like the Pyles and the Polsens.
Good, Jeff, and then we'll move on.
Mickey got most of it, which is deal with the noises at the source of the noise, quiet them down, get them far away from your microphone. That's the cleanest way to deal with it, not rely on processing.
Good. Jeffrey, real quick.
I just want to point out there is a difference between a dynamic microphone and a condenser microphone. One thing, most dynamic microphones have built-in pop filters, so that can help with some of the sound. And the other thing is that they're meant to be for closer range use. That's why they're used in bands a lot. So Alex is using a dynamic microphone. I'm using a condenser mic, so mine's going to be a little bit more open than his.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from our friend Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Is the Pyle mic and the Polsen mic going to be enough during the summer? If not, what will I need by then?
Probably to begin with, I think we can probably make that work. I think that we just need to think about EQ or something like that. I don't think we're going to try to cut those out yet, but we are going to look at a couple options that we recommend that are under $100. I'm probably going to buy a couple different ones. We'll probably take suggestions and then we'll put them all on my mixer and we'll go through them all and decide which ones we think are. I think we need to have all of them in the same place. So we'll do that on some pre-show, some pre-show or whatever. While I have like 3 or 4 mics in roughly the same position. And we just listen to them and as a group decide, or maybe on a Tuesday we'll decide like some of the mics. We might have like a mic off, where we have, because I need to recommend for people at different prices, all the way down from the 10 or 15 up to $1,000 or more, what mics we think are great for this kind of thing. And so I think getting them all recorded and talking about them would be useful. But I think we need a person with all of them in one place because it's hard. Every different environment and every different voice has a different thing. It's hard to measure without listening to it apples to apples. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Lou Perez in Phoenix. Do you have any recommendations on training your ears or educating yourself on hearing these subtleties?
Listening to stuff and talking about it with people who have really good ears is the best way to learn. Like the reason we do mic checks is that you can hopefully hear, one of the reasons we do mic checks is so that you can hopefully hear the difference between the mics and what you want to be listening for are the things that we're talking about. And again, why we did the pretty intense, ruthless review of the mics yesterday is so that we can train our ears, on what's there and what's missing. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Jeffrey.
Absolutely. Critical listening of known good reference content. Let's take a look at what are chosen as the best sound editing and sound mixing of pictures, especially by the MPSE, the Motion Picture Sound Editors Guild. Discuss it with other people.
Yeah, I would say that if I was going to say what is the top end of audio from a spoken word perspective, I'd probably say This American Life. It's probably the best spoken word audio production that I've heard. NPR being somewhere behind it. It's really good. NPR's got a couple things because they're more short term in nature, but I don't know if anyone else has an opinion about that, but I think that This American Life is pretty good audio production from a spoken word perspective. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Mickey.
There's a couple albums out there that you can get that go through frequency ranges, and then you can listen as they go through the frequency range to kind of feel how that goes. You can even layer it on top of music so you can hear that frequency range go as the music's playing. That way you get an idea of where everything starts to hit.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey. And then Jeff.
Yeah, another podcast that has really good production in terms of spoken word would be 20,000 Hertz. A fantastic podcast and sounds amazing.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
Another thing that's difficult about talking about sound is we have so many terms that are loosely defined. Earlier we had something sounds gravelly in the high frequencies. We'll talk about sound being muddy. So having that language is really difficult. It's much easier to talk about picture because we can draw on a screen and circle something and talk about where we're focusing on this right here. But to even direct someone who's listening to a particular problem is hard because it's hard to actually define and describe. I do have a link somewhere I'm going to dig up that has a chart of frequencies and some of the terms that get used for that. So I'm going to see if I can find that and put it in Discord, Mukana.
Yeah, you had Courtney.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jeff, because I was always flummoxed by people saying, well, that digital sounds brittle or, it doesn't have the warmth of, analog audio. I was just going to mention another good program to listen to audio is Radiolab on.
Radiolab's great. My favorite one, which doesn't have the best audio because they did it on stage, is I think I've said this before in Radiolab, is the how the asteroid killed the dinosaurs. If you just do a search for the Radiolab episode of that, is one of the best, my favorite. I get these shows, certain shows that I'll listen to over and over again. And I find that one, just the way that they pulled it all together and had you understand the enormity of it from a storytelling perspective is amazing. Jan and Mickey, real quick.
I find that Audible, all the books on Audible are well done. Also, being in the professional sound world, what I've found is that everybody has a preference. And no matter, some people like Meyer, some people like L Acoustic, some people like various different brands. And they base that on whatever it is. But then they say, that's my favorite sound. But the reality, everybody's ears are a little bit different. So it's all what's preference on what you hear.
Mickey?
Yeah, just one last thing I want to add, like with all these very good reference materials to study, listen to them with reliable reference monitors, be it speakers or headphones. Because if you're not listening to them on those, you can't really. It would be a lot more difficult to pick up the nuances.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from James Dublin in Dublin, Ireland. The audio quality has obviously improved since the first office hours. Many panelists have invested in mixpres and high-end mics. A few still use a more basic setup with $20 Pyles. Over Zoom, much of the extra expense seems lost, as you all sound great. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Tim.
Well, you can't unring a bell and you can't put back in quality that's not there to start with. So just like in video, it's a downward spiral. If you start low, all you have is low. So I would, and the other thing is, I don't think that it's not that you can't hear the difference over Zoom. Zoom does a lot of weird stuff to audio, but it doesn't make you someone else. I think that if you can't hear the difference, you need to look at your listening environment, your headphones or IEMs, because you should be able to hear the difference pretty plainly.
And I just want to say, I think that there are people with the right voice in the right space, with things set up well, with the mic set up well, can definitely do this with a Polsen or a Pyle. It's just that, there's people that I know that can wear whatever they want to, and they'll look good, and in the same way, some people can be in the right environment. It's just that they're not as predictable, so it's not guaranteed that they're going to sound great in those areas, but it's definitely possible to have them sound great, and definitely within, definitely within the range of what we're going to consider acceptable, but all the pieces have to come together. So you could use an inexpensive mic, but you have to have a good environment. You have to have that kind of thing. And, and we'll play it by ear, but I think you could definitely get an acceptable sound with those mics. Go ahead, Chris.
It's also important to take, for example, Jeff Francis on a Pyle microphone going into his ATEM. I happen to know this because I just made his lower Fenwick. He sounds good.
Yeah, he does.
But
exactly.
We don't know what he sounds like
he could sound
on another microphone. He might sound fantastic.
Yeah, we'd have to hear him on a U87, and we'll see how it sounds. All right, next question.
Next one's coming in from Keith Harrison in London. How good do you expect the color balance feature to be on the new Apple TV 4K?
Charles, did you see that announcement? Did you have any opinions? I'm just throwing it to Charles, right? He was a receiver. He didn't even turn around. I just threw the ball. Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah. Since Apple is controlling most of that chain, the hardware and the software throughout, I'm actually very interested to see what it looks like. I'm going to order it, of course. I think it's going to do a decent job. I think for professionals, it's not going to be what we're used to, but I have to deal with so many people that at home, they don't consider that or anything like that. So for the 90% of the people, 90% of the time, which is what Apple is really good at, yep. It's actually going to bring up the level of quality that they notice. So I think from that point of view, as a creator, it's going to help us translate our intent properly throughout the pipeline all the way to their TVs.
Yeah, I think that there are a large number of people that don't care. Then there's a bunch of people that really care, and they spend a lot of equipment on it. But there's I will argue that the people in the middle that do care, that spent $2,000 on a monitor or $1,500 on a TV or whatever, they do care. They just don't know how to get it fixed. And being able to improve, I think that it'll make it 80% better. Not 100% better, but 80% better would be a lot. It'll be a much better experience. And here's the trick that we were talking about in the pre-show. it'll only look good with your Apple TV. So if you use the built-in apps inside the TV, you're not going to get any value out of it because the Apple TV is doing the correction, not the TV. So it's going to make it super easy for you to go like this, and all your Apple TV content looks great. Doesn't help the TV. So it means that everything else is going. It's basically creating a dependency on an Apple device, which is genius. Anyway, Mickey or Ruthless, depending on how you think about it. Mickey and then Alex.
Yeah, I'm curious though, like for Charles, like you're essentially with the Apple TV, you're compensating from the source device, compensating for the inadequacies or the incorrect settings perhaps of the actual display. What do you think of like that solution? Like, or don't you typically want to do the correction on the actual display, the end device?
Yeah, Charles.
So for a long time, we've had things called like a LUT box. And essentially, that's what the Apple TV is going to turn into, which is very interesting. I didn't see that one coming at all. But it's a very smart solution for Apple to have that in so many homes at that entry-level price, essentially, because for $200 for that box to do all the things that it does and correct your signal in that very simple way with a device that you already own and you understand.
It's pretty nifty. Yeah. Go ahead, Alex, and then Chris.
I think it's going to be very good when we've got collaborators who we send videos to and they say they like it, don't like the color, and you're not sure what they're seeing. Obviously, the iPad itself is a good reference, but if they want to see it on their Apple TV, it's good. But I like the idea of Apple actually adding this calibration thing to Apple displays. And Apple, like my built-in MacBook Pro, if I could put my phone on it and get it to calibrate it so the MacBook Pro does the same as the Apple TV, that would be quite nice as well. So it's getting collaborators on the same page who are far away.
Go ahead, Chris. Can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Okay. I think that it's gonna fix a lot of things for a lot of people. It's not something you could color correct against it, but it's something that your experience. Well, the interesting thing is the behavior that people, I bet, will have is to turn their TV to the lowest, where it will work the best, that they turn it to the lowest contrast, not low contrast artificially, but is like turn off all the vivid, turn off all the other things, turn off. That's what's going to happen in social media. Is they're going to tell you to turn your TV to a point where you're doing as little damage as possible before the Apple TV has to do the correction. And so what's going to happen is that will continue to accelerate this process of everything else looks horrible except for your Apple TV, because you're going to push your TV to a really low contrast position, its lowest contrast position on what it's doing. So the Apple TV has the most to work with. And so it'll be really, it's an interesting behavior. One other question I have for while we're on color, Charles, the thing that I'm getting, one of the big reasons I'm getting the new iPad, which I will be waiting for at middle of the night, is using that as my playout display through a Sidecar from Resolve. Does that sound like a thing? Go ahead, Charles.
I have heard that same sentiment for people that knew that iPad Pro was coming out about like 4 months ago. A lot of people want to try that. Now, what I want to do, because in Apple, they have a little bit of the color management that sometimes gets in the way of things. Right. What I'm actually planning to do is I want to send a signal from my Ultra Studio Mini 4K to that iPad. And I want to see how that compares to my Flanders.
Right.
I think that'll give me the best look at how it actually feels. Right. But for 90% of the work, that's going to be a really nice solution. Like if you know what you're looking for, you're looking at the scopes and you sort of know what you're doing.
If you have scopes and an accurate monitor at that size, it's enough for you to, again, if you're not a professional colorist and you just want to get good color theoretically in HDR, it seems like a pretty good solution. Next question.
Next one's coming in from our friend Andy Kochendorfer in Viera, Florida. Thoughts on the Apple Center Stage announced yesterday? Will sending an iPad to remote presenters make more sense?
What did I miss there? Center stage. Did I go ahead, Chris?
Yeah, so I'm watching that, and basically I thought they just ripped off the Facebook thing. What is the thing I just bought? The Facebook
Portal, Facebook Portal Plus.
Yeah, they just ripped off Facebook Portal.
They mean I didn't put it together. The iPad. I doubt they ripped anything off. There's a lot of people who have been thinking about that for a long time. so I doubt there was any ripoff. They happened to come. They might have taken more time to figure it out. Go ahead, Paul. I can't hear you, Paul. Okay, go ahead, Jeffrey.
The one thing that I about the remote presenters, the one thing that Apple still has a problem with, and that is if the person is not normally a tech-savvy type person, then it's still very hard for you to try and set up their remote presentation. If they're tech-savvy, it shouldn't be a problem. But that's why I send out Android more than I'd send out anything Apple, because I know that if somebody doesn't know how to set up a camera, doesn't know how to set up a light, that it's going to take a lot more time to do.
It's going to take more time to do it on Android? Sorry.
No, less time, because I can actually remote into the Android.
Okay.
And
that
do
makes
it all
sense.
myself.
Yeah, we send computers out for that. We're now, by the way, we're sending out lots of B-links by Courtney. So that we've got, it's now like the B-links are now becoming this. The remote kits are all getting these little B-links. They're working out really well. I don't know, we got 3 or 4 of them now. It's growing. Go ahead, Alex.
I think the idea is. Sorry, somebody's interrupting me. I think that I like how the fact that they don't distort towards the edge of the 122 degree camera. So I think that's impressive. They're putting some math into that. So I'm being interested to see what it looks like if somebody pops up right on the corner of the screen. But it looks pretty cool.
The fact that it has the facial ID on it will mean that it will still, even though it's rough, it will still have much better information about what it's looking at than a portal. And so I think that it'll be, the portal is so inexpensive. I don't think they really live in the same space. This is an added feature to an iPad. It's not a replacement for a portal, which I just bought. I bought a portal TV and a portal just to do some testing. And so I'm still happy with that because they're relatively inexpensive compared to an iPad. I'd probably be less likely to send an iPad out. What I really need is a 2-camera solution, one that I can cut to either a presentation or another camera all in one machine, and I haven't figured that out yet. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Chris.
And one thing that looked interesting to me, at least in the demonstration videos that they showed yesterday, was it looked like it was doing a fake 3D movement, so it actually looked like a camera pan as opposed to just panning and scanning. And I don't know if that's just presentation trickery or if that's just if that's actually how it works.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so bad term earlier on my case, but we are planning on ordering one of those because as we watched it yesterday, we were like, this is so nice. I mean, it's just very nice.
For someone like we're looking at using for the Mad in the Kitchen activations, we're looking at sending out a portal to everybody so that's our main cook camera. And then we're sending out another machine, a B-Link, with a Brio for the overhead for their cooking. And we're just figuring out and then we'll have 2 different links into it. But following around someone in a space so that they can just talk. If you're running the presentation somewhere else, I think it could work out really well. And especially if you think of a Keynote Live scenario where they're moving forward on a if you just had that iPad there joining, and then you had if you had another computer and they're running Keynote, for us it would be Keynote, and it's connected via Keynote Live. I have the raw one locally, and it'll just keep changing the slides for me. So there's a really interesting way to do it. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Carmi Vinesweg in Redondo Beach, trying to decide between the Rode NT1 and the Heil PR40. Would like to hear pros and cons.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Is the time? It depends.
Yeah.
Depends on your use case. Like say if you're just going to use it for Zoom, for meetings and such, I'd probably lean more towards the PR40. I'd say dynamic microphone, and it has better, off-axis rejection compared to the NT1, which is a full-on large diaphragm condenser microphone. If you're going to use it for more artistic purposes, like say music and such, uh, depends on the kind of sound signature that you want. They sound drastically different. One thing that I really love about the Rode MT1 is it has an extremely low self noise. So it works very well with very quiet sources.
Yeah, and it's just a lot. The larger diaphragms are going to be a lot less forgiving. So that's the big thing, is just make sure that you have a space that can. I have a mic that I think sounds better than the Heil PR40, which is the Neumann 102. But I don't use it on a day-to-day basis because you hear all of my stuff on my desk and everything else in the room, and my kids getting ready for school, and I think sometimes you can hear the trucks outside. It picks up everything. So you just have to think about not just the quality of the mic, but what its behavior is. Next question.
Next one's from Don Modine in Manchester, Connecticut. Thoughts on the new iMac camera? Is it good enough to replace an external higher quality webcam or camera?
I think it will be very close to being able to replace it, possibly even better than something like a 920. I don't know if it'll be better than the Brio because you won't be able to pan and scan inside of it. But as a built-in camera, I bet you it'll be better than everything other than Brio, Huddle Cam, that type of thing. If you look at the math of what they're doing, they're not messing around. So like they're basically taking a lot of what they learned in the iPhone. And I can tell when someone jumps on here with an iPhone as their webcam, it looks amazing. So if they're doing anything close to that in the iMac, it's going to look really good. Go ahead, Chris.
Unless I missed something, is the camera on the iMac the same camera that's in the iPad? And if so, how come they can't scan?
It's not. It's not. It's a 1080p camera on the iPad.
Imagine what happens when they make that the same camera.
Yeah, if they move that to the same camera, it'd be quite a thing. Go ahead, Charles.
And also to add to everything that Alex just said, and Chris, the processing that Apple will be able to do on those chips in real time, I mean, they're so far ahead of everybody else. I'm expecting it to look really, really good.
Yeah. I don't think that if someone had an iMac, I don't think we would send them a camera. Next question.
Next one's from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. This one's for a friend. What 3 tips would you give to a diehard Windows user switching to a Mac for the first time? And has anyone switched from a Mac back to a PC, and why?
Go ahead, Jan.
I would give you a tip. I just inherited a Windows machine. It's very clunky to me because the Mac has so many programs and apps, like, for example, Hazel. So you could put a file somewhere and it automatically moves it to somewhere else. Right. Or Moom that adjusts the windows. And the third thing would be, Alfred, which you can type in what you want and it will find it for you. And the last thing is the drop zone, where you could take a file, drop it in the zone, or open up another file. The Mac is so much more convenient than a Windows machine. I used Windows for years. I can't think of going back.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Chris.
I'll give you one tip. Think upside down. The stuff that's at the bottom of Windows is at the top at a Mac.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I used a Mac for 15 years and now I'm all PC. I mean, with the exception of my wife. And the reason is I can't run my CAD software on a Mac. It just doesn't work. And I can run, in the box that I have right now, I have 2 Titan X cards, and there's no way for me to put that much graphics in a Mac. So
go ahead, Mickey, and then Jeffrey. Real quick.
Yeah, one of the first things of my friends deal with when they switch to Mac is if you have individual like storage drives, hard drives, but put in some budget to buy fresh drives that you can format in HFS, or I don't know if people would suggest the Apple file system right now, but have that storage to what do you call this? Transfer your files to a native format that OS 10 supports.
Right. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Courtney, real quick.
Go through the Windows list, see what apps that they're using, programs that they're using on Windows, and see how they're compatible with Mac, if you're going to move to Big Sur or not, because that's a very big factor.
Go ahead, Courtney, and then Todd, and then Paul, but like 10 seconds each.
If you like simplicity, go with the Mac and stay within all of their products, and they all work well together. If you like to fool around and do with complexity and invent stuff and add things and upgrade things, then go with the PC.
Yep. Go ahead, Todd.
I've transitioned both ways twice, and just one word, Patience. Just cultivate patience.
Go ahead, Paul. I can't hear you, Paul. You're going to have to get better at this. So whatever you've changed is making it harder for you to actually make noise. All right, next question.
Next one's from Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Has anyone used the new BMD Fairlight Desktop console hardware?
No, but I want it so much. so I that's all I can say is it looks great. You can do most of what you want in Fairlight without the console, but the real issue is that organic control. I'm actually working at a space, or I get to work at a space pretty often that has a really long console. Which take one of those, and then imagine like 20 of them next to each other, where they're doing mixing. And you think, why do they need all of those sliders? Because they could route everything to one, but it means that you can just reach over and know that everything's over here and everything's over here and everything, and you can very organically, and it really speeds up the process. So if you're doing audio day in, day out, I think it's highly worth it to have an analog interface. You can generally do everything in Fairlight without it, but it's clickety click. And what's interesting is I was talking to some sound designers that say that they can hear the difference. They can tell you whether someone mixed it with a mouse or mixed it with because there's things that you'll do when you're automating that you generally won't do in software that you will do if you have an analog interface. I don't know if Mickey wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, like definitely having an actual hardware controller. It's not really an analog interface. It's you're not feeding audio signals through that board. It's only sending control signals to your DAW. Definitely having something that's physical that you can touch and do the changes as you feel the need for it, as opposed to like noticing something then reacting a couple seconds later. Makes it very much faster, and also you could more accurately put into writing sort of what the changes that you want to put into your piece.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff, and then we'll move on.
With a mouse, I can mix one sound at a time. With a physical hardware interface, I can balance 10 different sound sources against each other.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Next one's from Jeannie Zindler Miles in Houston, Texas. I am literally starting from ground zero. I know nothing. What are the first pieces of equipment I should buy/try? I am the marketing person for FBS, an ultra premium appliance company. Think ovens and dishwashers. I really want to up our podcast and YouTube game. And by the way, I'm Fritchie's sister-in-law.
Well, hang out with Chris. That's a good start. It sounds like you got that sorted. So ask him lots of questions. Go ahead, Jeff.
The very first thing you should buy is a case of Chris's favorite whatever, and bend his ear. He will give you great advice on where to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So sorry, someone walked into my room for a second. I lost track. The thing that we always say is to solve things in order depending on what your budget is. So make sure that you've got great internet. Make sure that you've got a good mic. Make sure that you've got so it's usually internet, mic. Then make sure your lighting is good. Make sure then you work on your camera. Then work on your background. And so that's kind of what you want to think about. And just cleaning all of those up at first. And it just depends on the other thing you want to look at is how much money do you want to spend. I can tell you how to spend $100, $400, $1,000 and $5,000 and $50,000. And you just have to decide, like, we're going to really get into this. You have to decide what that budget is, because don't waste your money on the $400 kit if you were going to go to a $5,000 kit in a month. That's not something you want to try to avoid. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so she got into Discord this morning. So if anybody wants to help her out, her budget is literally sub $1,500.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's, you'll be able to do plenty with that. So get into Discord, ask questions, come here often, ask specific questions. It's hard for us to kind of, now that we know what that number is, we can start thinking about it. I would think about, go ahead, Jeff.
For $1,500 or less, I would get an ATEM Mini Pro, so you can stream from that. Probably buy it used, because a lot of people are dumping theirs as they're going to the extreme, so you can save some money on that. I would get a Pyle or a Polsen and plug directly into that so you have a good mic. And then probably you could go with, starting with just an HDMI camcorder, and you may even have one of those that you could repurpose as your camera.
Yeah, and you also want to think about whether you're doing mostly live or whether you're doing mostly videos for YouTube, and that's going to change what you buy, because some things are better than others for those different things. Like, we can tell you exactly how to do this, but if you want to do something where you're shooting lots of videos, and a lot of that can be done with a phone, you know, I mean, to get at this point. Go ahead, Paul, and then Jeffrey, real quick, like 10 seconds.
I'd go with the MV7, this microphone here, and I'd go with the Huddle Cam, because it's got great control, and if you can still afford it, get the ATEM Mini Pro. I assume she's already got a computer and all the rest of it.
And it just depends on whether you're going to do a dress like this, a front address, or whether you're going to shoot videos. Like, a webcam doesn't make as much sense if you're going to shoot the videos. Go ahead, Chris, do you want to outline?
Yeah,
that?
so for her podcast, she just uses her laptop, but they do have a showroom where they have all the stoves and stuff, so she does have to walk around in a space.
Yeah, she should. If you're interested, you should come on, and if a good thing to do also is to, if you can make it work, get into the pre-show or the pre-show, and then you can sit there and not in the broadcast if you don't want to, or you're more than welcome to do it in the broadcast too, but you can discuss it with us, you know, and we're happy to work with you and talk to you about it and so on and so forth. So that it might be a good way to kind of whiteboard the idea. It's hard for us to do it from one question, but I think that we can make that work. Okay, super fast. Jeffrey, and then Mickey, and then we'll move on.
It's very important to understand that a podcast is a podcast and YouTube is YouTube. Trying to put them together and doing them both at once could be overwhelming. Figure out if you want to do the podcast or the YouTube over, and then work that way.
Yep, go ahead, Mickey.
I'd also probably consider maybe getting a set of the Rode Go-Tos, which you can get at the dvastore.com. Since Chris mentioned that she would be walking around, and it just makes sense because what they're selling is quite large, larger pieces that they might want to, go around and show different parts of the appliances. Might want something wireless.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
One last thing to just add to that one is trade. I mean, there's lots of people, I know people in Houston with high-end red cameras. If you can get like 20 basic shots in a day that are really nice, beautiful shots from a Arri Alexa or something, might be worth it. All right, Robert Harvey in Fairfax, Virginia. Maybe too early to ask, but would Mickey/Alex say the new iMac would get the thumbs up on both audio and video right out of the box for office hours, of course?
We'd have to test it. I doubt the audio will work for what we're doing, but the video could, absolutely. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, same sentiment. Like tiny microphones like that. I mean, the even the lavaliers or headset mics with diaphragms that are that small are it's borderline in my opinion. But once you go to little components that you need a microscope to really see, then.
And even with an array that's doing correction, we've worked with one. Yeah, we've worked with ones that are really expensive that are an array inside of a room, and I have not ever. There's a couple of them that I've been impressed with, but they're like $100,000 units. Next question.
Next one's from Courtney Gooden. Has anyone ever tried using a polarizing filter on their webcam to eliminate ring light and monitor reflections in glasses?
But do you have a polarizing filter on your camera? That's the question. I wonder if that would work. It might. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, technically it should work, but you might get a specific color shift on the colors depending on the angle of the polarizer.
Yep. Go ahead, Courtney.
And one thing you do have to worry about is if you've got a setup like Mickey where you have LCD screens in the background, they may turn black.
Yep. Interesting. I never thought of that. It's a good idea. All right, next question.
And I got to do it. B-Link by Courtney.
All right, next
one. You get them in stock. They're sold out everywhere.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas, discussed the clubhouse look and feel of Discord that Leo used yesterday on MacBreak Weekly. Can we utilize this setup in our OH Discord? How do you do it?
I don't I don't subscribe to that process. so I don't think we'll probably do it. So there's a few reasons that I don't have audio in Discord is that I think will probably something that Leo will find soon enough is just that a lot of bad things can happen that you can't see when you have audio and video, because people are starting to create they'll create lots of things. Now, I don't think he has that opened right now. The other side of it is the Q&A of having people come in. I think that you heard at the beginning of MacBreak, all the reasons that I don't do that. It was pretty much a pristine case of why I don't do it. Horrible audio, rambling questions, like it's not a good, to me, it's not good content, and again, so I think that we do it via text because it's easy. And we also, limit how long your question can be, because otherwise we get really, really long questions. And so all of those things create a better show for everyone, as opposed to, I get that people want to be able to talk, but and I let anybody come in here that wants to talk, they just have to come onto the panel. So you can do that. So we have kind of what Leo's doing. It's just that we've spent a lot of time refining it to make it a little bit cleaner. So, and especially we do the same thing that we would do that he's doing in Discord in the pre-show and the post-show. Anybody can come in and talk about it. We give them extra rooms. We do all that stuff, but in a controlled amount of time. And again, not just coming in from their phone. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, quick follow-up. What are the mechanics of it? How did he do that, Alex?
Oh, it's a feature. It's like a brand new feature that Discord does. Like everyone's trying to compete with Clubhouse. Clubhouse is about to feel the pain of having a good idea, but not having it fully formed. So they came out with a good idea. They got a lot of rise, and I bet you Andreessen pushed it really hard because they're trying to get investment. They're trying to pump up the value so they can get their investment back. The problem is that they pumped it without everything that needs to happen next. And so it got a whole bunch of people in. They're excited about the idea, but they didn't have all the pieces that they needed to go to turn on next, right? And they didn't have and now what's happened is these huge companies are lasering in on them, and they're not going to be. I don't think the Clubhouse is going to be able to make it. I just don't think that they're not going to survive because they weren't able to keep on progressing, and so the solution to solve what they're doing now is easy, and so they needed to get to critical mass, and I just don't think they're going to do it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Also, Clubhouse limited themselves to one single platform of iOS, and that could be their death knell now that everybody else is targeting that, that type of app.
I think the biggest mistake they made was keeping it all voice. If they had put a Q&A app into it, it would have been an entirely different experience. And they're going to eventually get that in, but making it all voice, it's chaotic. It's why I quit. I was just like, all I'm doing is this show there, and I can't, and I'm using Makana because I can't, and I have to keep on saying where the link is, and it's just annoying. And because bringing random people in is not a good show. Like, I know that it's something that you think people think it's going to be a good show, but it's not. Next question.
A failure worth $4 billion.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh no, I've seen companies worth a lot more than that fail, and it's all just a gamble. Like venture capital are just putting chips on a roulette board. Next question.
Next one's from Lou Perez in Phoenix. Do microphones have a break-in period like headphones do?
Go ahead, Tim.
The quick and dirty answer is no. The realistic answer is maybe. Dynamic transducers like loudspeakers, the suspension gets exercised in the first few hours it's used, and that will change it. That's actually when they should settle into their stated parameter, the teal small parameters. Microphones, they still have elastic suspensions around diaphragms. So is there some mechanical exercise? Yes. Will it make a big difference? The quick answer is probably not.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I love Tim's answer, but specifically though for tube microphones, they sound different every time you power them up, and even the longer they're powered up, they keep on changing. So I don't know if you would call that the break-in period, but it changes the longer you use it.
Yeah, Jeff, real quick.
That's why historically studios have lava lamps, because the amount of time it takes the lava to start flowing is the amount of time it takes your tubes to warm up.
That's great. We're going to just let everyone know we have about 30 seconds of questions, so we're going to start moving pretty quickly. Again, for the viewers, it's important to vote on questions, especially right now, to figure out what we're going to do. I may or may not get to the top of the hours, but we're going to start moving pretty quickly now. Next question.
Tobias Moss, Minneapolis. What mic/earbud system would you recommend for wirelessly teaching a Zoom fitness class? Are there any Bluetooth earbuds that have a good mic? If not, what's the technical reason? And in parentheses, distance from mouth, something about Bluetooth, etc.
Most of the fitness ones that we've seen are using some version of a headset. There's a variety of ones that are more exercise driven and then you just have to decide whether they're rolling around or not. So how big or whether that pack makes sense or not. I haven't seen any that are all self-contained. So usually there's a pack somewhere that has to be done. On the higher end ones that we've worked with, they have a headset mic and then we actually wrap it to their body underneath their shirt as opposed to trying to put it on their hip. And that's going to be a little bit more work, but it just depends on whether you're shooting it or you're doing a fitness class every day. Next question. We're going to move
Chris
fast.
Ritchie in Tomball, Texas. Alex, can you explain the benefits of being on the Discord for newbies?
Yeah, the big thing is that we have this conversation only once a day, and Discord runs 24/7, and so you can dig into things and have discussions. There is an incredible amount of knowledge. Like I feel like this is the tip of an iceberg where we're talking about things, and then all the other discussion is happening at Discord, and this is important because it gives that direction and it gives some context for the Discord discussions. But this is where, the Discord is where a lot of the work actually gets done. And it's a place where you can keep on asking questions. It's threaded. You can look at what other people are talking about and learn a lot from there instead of just this one little space. But they're very symbiotic. And I think that you're going to get the most out of office hours if you're in the Discord. But we make it hard because we want people who are serious in the Discord. So they have to be there at the right time. And that makes it a better Discord, in my opinion. Next question.
Vincent Chan in Singapore. For video playback on vmix, is it better to load the video in vmix or use NDI to bring in a video player like QLab?
Guy?
I like it in vmix because you can hit quick play and it'll fire as you make the switch. And so to me, that's one less thing to do, although a lot of people use a Stream Deck and macro it, so it's easier to fire. So it just depends on if you have other triggers, because there's a lot of things that QLab can do that, lights and other triggers that you might want to do. But for me, I just make it simple and cut, and it goes right in.
Yep. Next question.
Next one's from David Brady in New York. New York. It's spelled NOOYAWK. York. What is an alpha channel, and how can a beginner create videos with alpha?
That's gonna be a hard one to answer in the time frame, but an alpha channel is a black and white map that controls the transparency of it. Basically, it's a knockout for graphics typically. So if you want to incorporate two videos or an alpha, you can do it there. I misplaced my pen. Anyway, I was going to draw. Basically, what you have is you have an image, and the way an alpha works is that it's actually multiplying. It takes that black and white image and it multiplies it to the foreground. It inverts it, multiplies it to the background, and then it adds the two together. And so it's basically knocking a hole out in the process. But essentially, it's a black and white image that is where it's black is usually where it's going to be transparent. Where it's white is where it's going to be opaque, or where it's going to sit on top of the other image. And where it's gray is where it's going to blend it, depending on what the gray is. And the easiest way to do that is you can use something like Motion or After Effects. Those are the places that are the easiest to generate motion, in my opinion, motion-based alpha channels. And then you export them out as either a ping. The Blackmagic likes a TGA sequence. And then you can also do Apple ProRes 4x4. The fourth 4 is the alpha channel. So you can save things out as Apple 4 Apple ProRes and put it onto a hyperdeck or other playout that will handle what's called a key fill output. Next question.
Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, Louisiana. Can Alex explain again using a persistent live feed to YouTube?
Persistent key, I think, is what I talked about before. It might be, and you can go into manage keys and basically set up this is a key that I'm going to call it something, and it's always going to be the same key. And the reason that that's important is because I can set up my encoders and I never have to change them. So now I can just always every week or every day or whatever I just go out to it. Otherwise, it generates a new key with every event, and that is that just makes it harder because I have to cut and paste it into my encoder or into Restream or into AWS or whatever. So we create persistent keys. The other advantage of that is you can use one key for 2 different events or 5 different events. So if you want to have part of it private and part of it public, or if you want to have a test stream, you can have both of them using the same key. So that becomes useful. Next question.
Our friend Mickey here on the panel from Manila, Philippines. Has anyone ordered the Anker PowerConf C300 webcam? What are your expectations?
I looked at the stats and didn't think that it was going to be, I can't remember what it was. That I'll have to look at it again, but I looked at it and didn't think it was going to stack up to what we're already using. So it wasn't going to distinguish itself from what we were doing. So with both that one and the Microsoft one, I just chose not to bother. But I haven't ordered it. I don't have enough time to dig into what it was, but there was some reason that I went, oh, this isn't going to be better. Next question.
Steve Della Petra, also from New York. Recommendations for the best PC virtual monitor software, looking to mirror a virtual monitor to a hardware monitor.
Virtual monitor to a hardware monitor. Would it be like Teradici? Is that what we're talking about? Or, I mean, is that, I think that's what we're trying to do, is trying to map it out to a monitor. You might have to give us a better explanation of what you're trying to do there. Next question.
Lee Love in Washington, D.C. Why does the new iMac only have 8 gigabytes of RAM? Is this enough?
Base configuration, it can be up to 16, and it's still like the little one. We haven't seen the new iMac Pro, so which we probably are going to see. So I think it sounds like Apple is now starting to clear their back catalog before they open the new ones because they're so different. So things getting end of life doesn't necessarily mean they're going away. Courtney, real quick.
Well, it's on a single die, and so you have to choose beforehand, and they're only making it in 2 versions of that die, so it's 8 and 16. That's your choice.
Yep. Next question.
Jeff Francis in Columbia, South Carolina. Canon XA-10 camcorder, 100 feet of fiber HDMI to an ATEM Mini Pro ISO. Video stable is on the camera. Video on the ATEM Mini Pro would bounce up and down very slightly. What caused this? Frame synchronizer? How do I prevent this in the future?
Almost certain it's the cable. Like, try it. So what I would do is take that camera and plug it straight in on like a 6-foot cable and see if you still see it. Just to try to eliminate that as a variable. But I'm almost certain that the cable is just having trouble either in the configuration of the cable or the length. But it sounds like the kind of cable would work, but there's some configuration that's not matching up. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm curious as well if the camera is feeding out interlaced material instead of progressive.
Mm-hmm. It still should be able to handle that. But yeah, next question.
Eric Price in Leavenworth, Kansas. For someone with mild hearing loss and persistent 7,000 hertz tinnitus, are there particular meters beyond dB to use to see sound quality that I might not be able to hear?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, a spectrum analyzer. And if you have almost anything by Behringer, there's as low as I think a 12th or 1/24th of an octave real-time analyzer, spectrum analyzer that'll display under the EQ window. And that will help you find things that you cannot hear or that might be covered up by other things.
They're not selling it yet, but Synaptic bought on the Mac Spectre, which is one of my favorites to be able to visualize it. There's also another one on the Mac called Sonic ATEM that will let you have a lot of scopes that you can look at, just like all the video scopes. You can have audio scopes, and then you start getting into more expensive ones. I don't know of cheap ones on the PC and Mac, but there's like Smart SMAART, which will have a lot of great ones, but it's really expensive. Next question.
Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, Louisiana. What tripods is Alex using when traveling for lights and cameras?
It's a it's a ProMaster CS or dash LT or LT dash CS. I can't remember which one that is, or LC. It's that combination of letters. So maybe someone can post it up there. It's like, I can't remember which one. It has a CS and an LT. There's some combination of those that gets you there. It's about an $80 for the lights, but it's amazing, and it packs up into a case. And then I use the Mi Photo. I have a C2350 that I carry, and again, the rule is they have to be able to fit into my carry-on. So that's so those are the tripods, and then I'm now using the Pavo tubes for my lights, a Brio, and a USB pre with a Countryman, is kind of like the little kit that you'll see me in on tomorrow and Friday. All right, next question.
Another one from David Brady. I've been seeing ads for NVidia Broadcast App. Is this a viable add-in for us Windows users for noise cancellation? It also touts a face tracking capability, and the link is in the notes.
Has anyone used that? Whoops. Yeah, I definitely want to test it. I don't have any opinion about it yet, but it looks really cool. How much is it? Does anyone know?
It's free with the it's free when you get an NVIDIA card, and it does okay. The noise cancellation is not that great.
Okay, there you go. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand. Is Alex aware that Apple bumped up the specs on the M1 Mac Mini to now have 10 gigabyte Ethernet as an option?
For those of us who use
gigabit,
servers, that's using the servers, that's super useful. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Attila ACS, Ocean Shores, Australia. Starting with 120 frames per second footage with fast movement, and you convert it down to 24 frames a second. What normal people see that something looks wrong if you don't recreate the motion blur in the low FPS version?
You would have to create the motion blur to make it work. Otherwise, it'll look super stuttery. And you would have all those frames to do it. What you're doing is basically drawing a velocity between those pixels. This has been around for 20 years or 50, at least 15. So, and it's only gotten better, and you could totally push it into hardware at this point. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I mean, when you actually see it. I mean, we've used this technology for CG for a long time. So if you rendered it, it would be there. Courtney, real quick.
If you look at the opening battle scene and Saving Private Ryan, that was all shot with a very short shutter angle, so it creates that same stuttery look.
But you wouldn't have to do that. Going down to 24 from 120, you would be able to have full motion blur that you would normally see. It wouldn't. Yeah, Courtney would say it would look worse than that, because that's more like that's a quarter. Right, it's half the motion blur that normally happens, but you could totally recreate it. I'll try to do a test of that and put it up somewhere, because people need to see it. The software to do it is there. Next question.
James Fosslin in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Like an Alex teardown ? I would like an office hours half-hour teardown of the Apple event production, storytelling, and how one can produce a modest version. Thoughts?
Should we do that as an extra hour, a second hour? Does that make sense for people? Like a little. Okay. We'll do that next week. Next question.
Paul from Austin, Texas. Which band is best for a fitness headset? Samsung 99M, K-band 4070 to 490 megahertz, or D-band for 542 to 566 megahertz. Is either of these bands endangered?
I
don't know which bands are which. Go ahead, Tim.
The quick and dirty answer is the FCC has still been mandated to make money for the government from the use of UHF TV channels. And so the quick answer is nothing is sacred and nothing is guaranteed. Sennheiser and Shure are currently collecting requests for comment. Comments for a request for comment to an pending FCC action. I would encourage you to go to Sennheiser or Shure and check that out, because they're trying to keep 1 6 megahertz TV station allocation in each market for wireless mic use. Wireless mic use is under assault, and TV station white space devices that are unlicensed are going to be invading your space also, unless you have a Part 74 license or your venue is registered because you use 50 or more wireless mic channels on a routine basis. So the quick answer is nothing's guaranteed, and don't bet on anything with a large amount of money and think it's going to be there in 2 years.
Right. Next question.
Next one's from Paul. About half the panel is wearing glasses. Are these reading glasses? Has anyone found good reading glasses that 1, don't scratch, 2, don't fog up, 3, reduce blue light?
That would be Guy. Guy found one.
These ones are just some gamer glasses that Chirag first turned us on to, and those of us that are reading really small print, doing a lot of coding for hours. I mean, these are like so soothing, and they're like $40 on Amazon. They're called Gollner glasses.
That's great. Next question.
Next one's from Abe in San Diego. Is it possible to run a webcam 50 feet away? If so, where could I find a cable that long?
We've heard people do it, but it's not a good idea. Go ahead, JJ, real quick, just 10 seconds.
Yeah, I'll put the link in Amazon, to Amazon. It's a 60-foot cable. I've used it.
It's USB that far is crazy. Anyway,
There's
Guy?
also some very long ones that they use for webcams in medical facilities that Video 360 has. We have them on our website. They're really long, like 200.
But they're amplified, aren't they?
bucks.
They're amplified over
Yeah.
Ethernet. Is that right?
Yeah, and then there's special shielding on them so they don't interfere with medical devices. So they're
Right.
really pricey, but they work.
Yeah, getting something specialized would work, but then you're dealing with a whole other set of things. Go ahead, Mickey, 10 seconds.
I think I mentioned this the other day. A huddle cam is technically a webcam, and you can run it off HDMI.
Yep. Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. When configuring Mac Minis for scope box or other screen scraping needs, what should I put on the checklist to be configured or disabled? Turn off screensaver, notifications, updates, etc.
All those things. Turn on Do Not Disturb. Set it to 9. I set it to 9:59 p.m. to 10, opening back up at 10, or closing at 10 p.m., opening at 9:59. You'll get them all at one time. Just turn off anything that comes up on its own. Like just everything. Just turn it all off. If you're going to do that kind of thing, don't let any of it pop up. Mickey, 10 seconds.
Yeah, very good things to do there. And also clean your desktop, no icons if possible, and put in a background that you'd be okay with people seeing, like just black or maybe a logo.
Yep. Next question. Not your logo, because if something goes wrong, they see it. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Roman Kirik in Kiev, Ukraine. If you have the option to connect to a presenter's notebook by HDMI or NDI, which way will you choose and why?
NDI is easier. I think I would feel better with an HDMI connection. Go ahead, Mickey, real quick.
Yeah, HDMI. If NDI, I would assume that you would need to install some sort of driver to feed that out.
Yep. Next question.
Aaron Husledge in Durham, North Carolina. What is a good 4K 120 hertz display to get?
I think almost all of them are 120 or 240. They're all the TVs are capable of it. I don't think that most of the devices aren't, and the streaming isn't. So I think almost you can look at it, but almost everything that says ProMotion or anything else, people complain about it going up. The TVs can generally most of them can do it at $1,500, $2,000 or more. They can all do the frame rate that's necessary. I like LGs. All right, next question.
Another one from Roman in the Ukraine. What is the best way to use a lapel lavalier microphone? Where to put it and at what distance from the speaker's mouth? Maybe some tips and tricks.
That's a really long conversation, but I don't know if anyone wants to try to answer it in 10 seconds. we could probably have a whole second hour on it. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Tim.
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, it would vary from if you need it concealed or not, but usually somewhere in the sternum, like right here, would be a good spot, like around a foot and a half from the mouth.
Go ahead, Tim.
I go a little closer than that. On men, I usually go the third button from the collar. So that puts it right above the sternum. I found that to be a pretty good place. The problem with men is you might get some chest resonance you have to EQ out. And I don't like putting them very much off to the side, because if a presenter turns their head, it drops out.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'd probably go even a little closer to Tim. I would say chin to chest and just below that. So tip your head down.
Yeah. I do between the first and second one typically, but you do, I have adopted other than it looking odd to me, I have started to adopt the BBC style of turning them upside down. So it's the only place I've ever seen it. And it was explained to me not to get the pops. And I was like, oh, but you're picking up all the stuff. They're like, well, it's an Omni, so, anyway, so that's a new one. Go ahead. We're going to move on to the next question. Last question before we go to Alex. Go ahead. Next question.
Chris Fritchie in Tomball, Texas. Did everyone else notice all the audio drops while Tim Cook was walking on the keynote?
I think there were so many of us talking at the same time. I don't think I noticed any. I'd have a hard time believing that they would be there. Were there audio drops? I think might have been something on your side. I don't think that Apple would have put something out with audio drops. So you were going to say something, Paul?
Yeah, Fritchie has superhuman hearing now since he cleaned his ears.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I can hear it. No, I didn't hear anything. So, all right. Now we're going to shift gears and jump into this. A little background is that Alex has been working on the graphics. The other Alex Gollner, Alex 40 Gollner, has been working on graphics for Mad in the Kitchen. And so to produce those graphics, he instead of having him render everything out when there's a lot of changes and so on and so forth, he just builds a file that we can use, that we can turn on the things on and off that we want, and then render those out either in motion or it's still. And the last motion file he sent me, I was like, this is the most technical motion file I've ever seen. And I was like, it just, and it shows you how powerful that app is. And so I just wanted to, I really wanted Alex to kind of walk us through it. So Alex will show it. If you have questions about it, this is a great time to ask them when you start to see it. So we'll have Alex talk about it for the next 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions and have you outline that. So go ahead, Alex, take it away.
Hello. Yeah. So this was for Mad in the Kitchen for that happened on Saturday. So I think what I'll do is just share my screen, and then I can show you what we're talking about. Both. So I'll do that. Share. I guess I want to do share a.
Yeah, just share motion. Should be able to.
Strange. I'm just trying to actually share the. Sorry, this seems to have changed. I just want to show a certain screen, but there you go. I don't want to share a window because I want to show different screens.
Right. Oh, got it. Okay.
Ah. So I've got a thing saying 1 and 2. I guess do I? I'm sorry for this stalling. And do I go to advanced computer slides?
Oh, because you have 2 screens.
Yes, I do. So how do I share a screen as opposed to the?
It should give you a choice between 1 or 2, right?
So I do have it just says 1, but it doesn't seem to be listed in the view. And I got the newest version of Zoom as well. Sorry about this.
Something. No worries.
I do have motion.
Yeah, interesting. I'm not. I don't see the option to share a specific display either anymore, and I'm on the latest version of Zoom.
I wonder if what I could do is no, I don't want to do that. I guess it's funny. It doesn't even see that motion is open, which it is. It's got something on it. It's not listing it.
You may have found a bug.
Okay, well, here we are in motion. So this is the view of what this motion file looks like when you open it. So it doesn't make that much sense, I suppose you could say. But the important thing is to say, firstly, if you don't know transparency in most apps like Photoshop and in Motion, the checkerboard pattern is the transparent bit, the bit that would actually be, if we exported a PNG, that would be transparent, and that could be loaded into the switcher, and then video could be laid out so that video shows beneath in those rectangled areas. So that's the idea. So this is what the super source maker, which is what I called it, super source maker, looks like. But the important thing is there's lots of little parameters all hidden in places here, like the text for this here is defined by selecting this text and going to an inspector and choosing format and then typing in text down here. Now, if somebody needs to quickly change some text, that's rather inconvenient to have to go to this specific layer and know all that kind of stuff. But what you can do in Motion is you can select something like this text and right click and choose publish. And what that does is it puts that parameter in one place. So what happens is you put it in the kind of top layer of the project. So what I did is I chose a series of parameters that would be useful when making PNGs. So the idea is we know that we've got a limited amount of text. We've got the screen on the left, which I've called main 1, the screen on the right, main 2, and then guest 1, 2, and 3, which are our chefs. And then I've got a spare text box in case there's some text you want to put somewhere. And as you can see here, we've got this field here called platforms. So what I can do in Motion is I can select that text. And what I'll do actually is I'll unpublish it to get the idea. Unpublish. And I'll go to this text here, so you can see it's selected. And I'll go here and choose publish. And what that does is it puts that parameter, the value of this text, and puts it into a new field that appears at the bottom of this list called text. So what I usually do, obviously, is I put URLs or something like that, give it a useful name, and then I can drag this parameter to a useful place. So I could put it here, for instance. So what I'm doing is the complexity that's hidden in multiple layers, I just choose which parameters I want. Say for example, this, or complicated parameters and settings to do with how all this works. Give you some idea of the kind of what motion looks like when you mess with it. I can just say, okay, this color is useful. I'm going to make it available somewhere else, for instance. So that's what this system is, essentially, is that I can choose useful bits of text. So in the case of, I'm trying to move this control strip away from...
We can't see that control strip.
All right, because unfortunately it's right in the middle of my... see if, I can drag it. Good, fantastic, I can drag it. Apologies. So what I can do is this text for Madeline's name, Madeline Smithberg, that I know exactly where that is. I can make that available and give it a name, main one. So the instruction I will give to someone is, okay, open this file, select this project layer if it's not selected, and then make sure that the project tab is selected and publishing is selected. This usually happens when you click on it anyway, but this is the instruction to give to someone. So I would put Alex Gollner in there, and then I would have the guest speaker, guest chef would be there, and then I will put, I will save these for later. So the trick is the kind of the thing that I did was I've also made it so that you can choose different layouts. Now I'm going to see if it would be really nice if I could share my desktop, because that's kind of what I got ready, but I guess there's no way of doing that. Okay. I was going to show what it looked like in Mad in the Kitchen when we did it, the different kinds of layouts, but it doesn't matter. So I've got a pop-up menu up here called Layout, and that says 2. It doesn't look very exciting there, but that's just the name of the layout, which is 2 screens. We've got lots of different layouts. We've got 2 screens plus 1 guest screen, 2 screens plus 2 guest screens, 2 screens with their guests further apart.
And by the way, I figured out why you can't do that. Mickey, can you look in host and see if you're able to enable someone to share a desktop? I think it may be turned off, and I don't know if it's available in the webinar, but I was experimenting with a couple things to protect people from themselves.
I couldn't. I can't see an option for that.
I won't be able to change it. So Alex, it won't be there, and I did it. It's my fault. It's not a bug, and I just want to make everyone know it's not a bug in Zoom. I did that because there's been a couple screen shares where people inadvertently showed things that probably not, from a security perspective, they didn't want to show. And so I turned off the ability to do that. So you had to go to a window. So it's my fault. Anyway, so just to manage your expectations. All right, go ahead.
Sure. Well, pain is the best teacher, and I've learned something here, and I guess we all have here. That's really good.
I guess we all have, especially Alex. Alex learned something. All right. Next question. Keep going.
So I've got these separate different layouts which allow me to have, say, for example, I pick this layout for 2 and 3, and then I can put in this text. This is some text that I am typing.
And the real power to this, I mean, this is what so impressed me about what Alex had done, is look at this. We're changing all of the looks. Everything carries along. Everything is there. So whenever you change whatever that is for that piece, it changes with every single layout that you're working with.
Oops.
And that is super.
Sorry.
I mean, it was so fast to be able to kind of throw things together, with what we were doing there.
So yes, I kind of there are many more layouts that we didn't use, but essentially that's the trick, to make it so that this magical pop-up menu that you can create in motion, which essentially what that menu does, it's connected to lots of different things and changing lots of different settings. So if I go to this pop-up here, and I'll just give you some idea. Every time that's changing the coordinates of the text boxes, it's changing the margins on the text so that the text stays up inside the box and doesn't go off the edges if lots of text is there. So as I switch these different settings here in this pop-up, you can see that if I scroll down a little bit here, of course I can't on this thing. If I change the different layouts, you can see that these settings are, it's hard to say, you can see some of the values changing every single time. So what I'm doing here with this pop-up menu is I'm bundling lots of different parameters all over here into one little pop-up menu. So that's the power.
How do you create that?
you build them up over time, bit by bit. So they start off looking, that looks really complicated, right? Because of course I'm doing a load of different things, but it is not as bad as you might think. So I've got this kind of this basic one here. So what I could do,
So, I guess it's still showing. Well, it didn't change. You might have to reshare.
Yes, I'm gonna have to share a different window in Zoom. Okay, so I'm gonna go to.
It's all Alex's fault.
Okay, so in this document, you've got your just the background. So I would call this the area down here the common layer.
And is that background dynamically created? Is that a replicator?
It is, yes. We can get into that if you like, but essentially what this is that I've got a color solid, which is just this rectangle here, and I can choose whatever color I want it to be. But what I did was I'm just going to recreate this replicator. So get a circle. I'm going to make it, and I'm selecting it and saying I want this to be 10, radius of 10 by 10. Just going to get my notes in here because I've got some settings to doing this so I can get it to be consistent. Wait just a minute. So I've got this circle here. If I just have the circle selected, which it is, and I'm going to turn on, if I select it and click the replicate button up here, it creates a little grid of those circles. And essentially all I do is set the size of that thing to being what I want it to be. So in this inspector over here, I set it to be 1920 by 1080. Cool. Also, I want to make it so it's actually centered. It's in the middle of the screen, so I can go to its properties and I just could reset it so it's in the middle. Of course, it's going to reset it somewhere else. I'm just going to try and do a little trick here and not get into all that. And center it. And in the case of that, I don't have enough dots, so I go to replicator. And the way the math works is that if I wanted to have, let's say, 64 columns, there were 64 columns, I need 65 dots, because of course you've got the columns plus the one extra dot. So I'll make it 65 columns wide, so that's 65 dots across. And as it's 60 by 9 times 18 plus 1, 30. And essentially you work out that it should be 37. So 37 high will create a grid. Actually, I put it on the wrong one. I want 37 rows. Cool. And they're a bit big. So I can scale down every single instance of that little dot down to.
And again, normally a lot of people would think about doing this in Photoshop. And the problem with that is that once you do it in Photoshop, it's just what it is in Photoshop, instead of being able to constantly be working through making those changes.
So yeah, I mean, and then I like to offset it a bit. This is what I did in that case, just to give it a different feel. Now, this circle is still actually, strangely enough, it's still based on that circle. I can go back to that circle and do whatever I want to it. So I can change its color at the very least. But I can do just, I don't know, make it larger. Of course, that doesn't really work with this grid, or I can make it smaller. So this is the circle, which is actually invisible, and it's just being replicated, and I can do whatever I like to it. So I can make it so that they're little squares, because I changed the curvature to squares, and make the radius a little bit smaller. But then what you can't do in Photoshop very easily in the case of a replicator, let's see, where are we?
In the sense of Photoshop that I know of doesn't have replicators, so you'd end up building some kind of pattern and then repeating the pattern, and then instead of being able to just play with it interactively.
So I can also I can colorize everything to a different color here, or I can pick from a color range and then have a whole lot of different colors being applied to these things, or I can even from this I can get a big variety of different randomly selected palettes. Don't look at that one. So yes, I can pick from different color ranges, or let's see. So there's lots of control here for doing things like making it into 3D, and then I can, if I was doing things in 3D, then you're getting effects that you don't quite see, and I need to actually add a camera. Now I'm not going to, there you go. So replicators are very powerful, but in the case of this project, they're just some dots in the background. And the reason why that is I can just, with the one that is I've got here is I can change things if it comes necessary to change them, because somebody has a change of, they change their point of view and say, we don't want them to be offset a bit, let's keep it down so that it's a proper grid, and all I have to do is change a single value.
And the one thing that, you know, I do both outside of Matt in the kitchen, I do some work with Alex. And the one thing that, because he's so good at motion, the one thing I know is that the response time is incredibly fast. You know, it's like, he'll send me some graphic and I'll go, can we make it a little of this or whatever? And you get it back almost immediately if he's awake and connected. And it's because of the hard work ahead of time and I don't say in hard, but the diligence in putting these parameters together inside of a look so that he's not having to rebuild the whole thing every time I ask for some small change. And really that's the power of building kind of a dependency graph in the way that he's doing it here. Go ahead, Alex.
So yeah, I mean, so in the case of this one, there was something else I was going to show. Building up that layout thing, which looked incredibly complicated, but I'm just going to do a little bit of it to give you some idea. So I'm going to, you won't be able to see this, but I'm going to drag in some media of the different layouts and just drag them in as a layer. So I'm just dragging from the Finder, and I'm just going to drag them in into this project. So here they all are. And essentially we've got all these, I created these in Illustrator, and we can come back to how I did that and the actual creation of all these in Illustrator if you like. But essentially I've got lots of different layers because I've got Mad in the Kitchen, Super Source, and then I've got a name, either 2 screens or 2 screens M for mask. So what I'll do is I'll delete some of these so you can see what they actually think and their thing actually looks like. So we've got something like, no, not that one. So essentially we've got that shape was created in Illustrator, and also I created a mask to go behind it. Now, of course,
now why did you create that shot in Illustrator as opposed to Motion? Because I would create that in Motion.
Well, the thing is that I afterwards, subsequently, I made the same effect in Motion to make these shapes. But essentially what I was doing was I will actually go to Motion to just give a little bit of the journey into how the logo turned into my design, because I think that's a useful thing. So I'm going to change my screen share magically to this. Okay, so you can see Illustrator at the moment. Is that right? Oh,
we still see Motion.
Share. There you go. Okay.
All right, we got it.
So this is Ken's logo that he did as part of the design of the Man in the Kitchen website, and with the variation of live being put on top of it. So this is my recreation of it in Illustrator. And the first thing I did with the logo is I made all the black areas not black, but actually a tint, because Alex said we want it to be, might be able to use going to be doing some keying, and the idea of the black is going to be transparent. We don't want things to be showing through the logo necessarily. That's not the design. So this is the logo, and I thought, okay, well, firstly, I want to create frames that are related to the drop shadow. So I kind of did that. And I'd kind of come up with in Motion that a certain grid. That grid of all those dots is based on a 30 point grid. Every dot is 30 points across, because 30 points fits horizontally and vertically into 1080 by 1920. So I thought, okay, well, if I got a 30 point grid, I might around the screens have a 30 point border. So this is a 30 point border of black, of the pink around black. So what does that look like if you have it on the screen like that? So imagine if this is full screen. Now that isn't of course 16 by 9 anymore, because it's been inset a bit, but it's just an experiment to see if the outside border was enough. So I put 30 pixel squares around the outside edge and just made a screen fill the area. But I knew my layout that I was going to be doing was going to be based on needing a screen, multiple screens. So the idea was I needed one big screen and 3 little ones, because essentially that's an example of the main person speaking and then the guests. So I came up with this kind of arrangement of thinking, okay, we've got this grid. I'll just put this frame on there so you can see what I mean by that. Not that one. That one. Essentially, you've got 30 points, then another 30 points for the border. But if we wanted to have 3 screens, 1, 2, 3 little screens, and then one big screen here, then effectively the definite, and where all these screens are 16 by 9, then I know the dimensions of these screens, because what it is 1080 minus 60 minus 90 minus 90 minus 60. That's effectively what's left, because we've taken the vertical height of 1080 and we've taken away these, essentially all the gaps. So that means the height of this screen is defined as being whatever 1080 minus the gaps are, the borders and the gaps. That became the height, and all sources are 16 by 9 in this project. So that means I know the width, because essentially the width of this is the ratio of 16 by 9. So I put another gap in here of border, actual gap, border. So then I know that effectively my layout of the size of the bigger screen is defined by whatever width is left. You'll see what I mean when I turn this on. So effectively what I've got is I've got my 3 vertical screens defined by the total height available, defined how wide this was, and my gap of my margins essentially of 30 points. Because what I do in SuperSource is I find it a bit irritating sometimes when the margin on the outside edge is not the same as the margin between things.
Don't watch any broadcast in the United States, because they do it all the time. It makes me crazy. Like, you know, it's just like, anyway.
So, and also I'm partially doing it for a client like Alex. So I had a feeling that maybe this would matter to him.
I pick at white space a lot. I have my form of dyslexia is that I see white space equally to black space, and so that makes it hard to read, but it makes me really particular about space. Anyway, go ahead.
So effectively, the widescreen here is the width that's left over in pixels from doing this, and that's the width, and the height is obviously the ratio of 16 by 9. So this is how I came up with my actual layouts of these things, is based on that, the source of it. And then I thought, well, I've got this this dotty thing here. If I put inline dots in these screens, then effectively I've got my design. So that was the kind of, that's the trick of it, really, in terms of the design progression. I do have things I was going to do in the Finder show multiple screens, but it doesn't matter. So anyway, sorry about that.
How do you expose the parameters? If you can go back to motion, and then we're going to go to questions for a little bit, because we've got a bunch stacking up. But how do you, like, when you set all those up, you have all those different layouts. How do you get them into a project file? How do you publish them to that project? I had never seen that before.
So in the case of, here's the actual, here I'm going to pick a different pair of, you can see motion, right? Is that right?
Yeah, we can see motion.
Cool. Okay, so what we had there was this layout. Essentially, the files came from Illustrator and look like this. Mm-hmm. So the first thing to do is make it so that the black areas knock out everything. So this is just a, by the way, I select the mask itself and I choose Silhouette Alpha. Oop. But of course, I've forgotten my background is black, because that's the default for motion. So I need to make it so that the actual motion shows transparency. So essentially what that means is this layer, if I move it, it's knocking out whatever, knocks out everything below it.
This gets back into the creating alpha channels that was asked earlier. It's one of the ways you can do it.
So essentially what I want to do is make it so that I can turn these pairs of layers on and off depending on a pop-up, on the value of a pop-up menu. So essentially I'm building up the margins, so the layouts thing. So essentially I get this one and I go, okay, I've got this layer selected, and I choose, let's select this one first. And what I do is I create a widget in a rig. Now, a rig is a place where you hold multiple widgets. This is the name for it, although the name, for some reason, you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to say add to rig, create new rig, because there aren't any rigs in this yet. I don't know why they're called all that. And then what I'm going to do is add this to a pop-up menu. In other words, the opacity of this layer.
I didn't even know this add to rig existed in Motion. I've used it since version 1. I don't watch tutorials or talk to Alex. Anyway.
So I go to add to pop-up. And essentially what I've got here is a rig called, so I'm going to call it published params, just for me. And this menu is now going to be called layout. So I'm just, thing about Motion, you've got to name things as you go, otherwise you'll go completely crazy. inside, otherwise you won't know what's going on at all. I promise you.
I've been there many times.
And it's so tempting just to, I'll name that later, and you get 17 different things called link or something, you know.
Final.
So what I've got here is notice that. So what I've added I've added I got this widget selected in this rig. So that's called a widget, and it's called. I've given it a name called layout, and it's made up of 3 snapshots. These are not great names, but you'll see what it means in a minute. And what it means is that I'll be able to eventually, if I choose a different value in this pop-up and change the value here of this parameter, then when I choose this, I'll just do it and then it'll make more sense. I apologize for that. So I'm going to select the other layer, which is the actual colored part of it, and get the opacity. And just to make it quicker, I'm going to drag this opacity thing to there. So that adds that parameter to be controlled by the pop-up menu. And now I'm going to add the other ones. Now, of course, this is all going to look a bit kind of all jumbled up as I do it. And what is a good idea when doing this, weirdly enough, is to make sure all these things start off with an opacity of 0. So I'm going to select all these different layers, and I'm setting the opacity of all these things that I'm going to put in the layout as 0. So what I'm doing is I've got them here, but their opacity are all 0. And you'll see why you do this before adding them to the widget in a minute. So sorry if I'm going too fast and this is taking too long, but you'll get it. Okay. So here we have all our layers are there, but their opacity is 0. So what I'm going to do is get this opacity of which is called overlay side, and I'm going to drag that into layout. Add that parameter. Add that parameter. See, once these things are set up, then it goes a lot faster because essentially I've set up these different parameters. I kind of got the widget ready, and then I can drag things in there. Now I can see these ones have already been rigged because it's got a little control thing here, which means this is going to be controlled by something else. And you'll see how that makes sense in a minute. So I'm going to drag that on there. Then this one. The advantage is that if say I wanted to I keep using the director version of it. It's so weird. I'm using Macromedia director terms for this instead of puppeting things. I could drag all these parameters to here, and all of them would then be controlled by that pop-up menu. But we're not going to do that. So, why did I do all that? Well, I've got all these snapshots here, and I've got this widget. And I could call it layout, and I'm going to give this the first one. I'm going to give this the name of two screens, I suppose I'll call it. And then for 2 screens, I want 2 layers to have their opacity of being 100. I want the one called SuperSource 2, that one there, and then SuperSource 2M for mask. So all I do with 2 screens is I go, okay, I want that to be visible, and then that to be visible.
Oh my! Oh,
okay.
So sorry.
And then,
to be fair, there's like 10 people on the planet that know how to do this, Alex.
I know. No, this is why I wanted Alex to come in, and I think I wanted him to come in because I was like, I have no idea how he did this. Like, I opened up Motion and I literally did not know what I was looking at. I was just like, it's like I've been flying this biplane and it is amazing. Like, I can do little loops and everything else. And Alex sent me over. He flew over in a 747. I'm like, where did you get that plane? Like, how do these little things that go around? How does that work? It's not a propeller. I don't understand. So anyway, it's great.
Thank you.
Keep going.
So that's called layout. The first layout is called essentially these menu items are initially called snapshots.
Yep.
So 2 screens does what I want, but I've got a new snapshot here, and what I need to do is rename that. I'm going to rename it 1+. Essentially, the reason why I can see these ones here is they were at 100% when I added. They were visible when I added these 2 parameters. The parameter of the. I'm going to move this a little bit wider so you can see the names of these things. Initially, I added the opacity of the masked layer, and then the actual front of it. I added those to this when I created this widget. Sorry about this. So what I can see what this layout is. This is 1 big screen plus 3 little ones. So I'm going to rename this as 1 plus 3, which means that if I do this and do this, it switches. And if you look at, as I'm doing here, is I'm changing the pop-up menu, and you can see all it's doing is changing the parameter, it's changing the opacity of some of the layers. I better rename that because that's exclamation mark plus 3, which it deserves to be, but I'll leave it as that. And then the idea is that I go and choose snapshot 3, which already exists. Now, at the moment, when I added those parameters for these two layers, they're 100%. So now what I'm going to do is I don't want those. I want to pick some other layers to be visible. So I'm going to pick 1 plus 3 side. No, I've already got that one. Yeah, 1 plus 3 side. I'll pick 2 plus 3. So before I even show what layers, before I even set the parameters so the opacity of these is 100%, I first rename it to say, okay, I'm going to be doing 2 plus 3. 2 big screens plus 3 smaller screens. I keep pressing shift. 2 plus 3. And I find my layer called, oh, that's 2 plus 3. I'll turn that on. Fine. And then I turn the opacity of its mask on so it knocks out the back. Now notice that the mask is slightly knocking out the border a little bit there. So what I can still do is I can change the order of these layers just by dragging down here, like that. So now when I look at my layouts, I can switch between 2 screens, 1 plus 3, and 2 plus 3. And then, because there's only 3 pop-ups here, all I have to do is add another one and go, oh, okay, new snapshot. We'll call this 1 plus 1 overlay. 1 plus 1 overlay. And then the first thing I do is I need to make it so that those aren't visible for this pop-up. Because essentially by doing that, by pressing plus, it added another menu item essentially to this pop-up. And then I just renamed it.
And then how do you display this? I'm going to go to questions here in a second, but how do you display it without all these sliders? I mean, you're basically, how do we then show it? How do we get to where we were before when what you sent me? What
Sure.
am I looking at?
Okay.
And then we'll jump to questions.
So what essentially I get this here, and then I will just make this point in terms of the overlay on the side, and I need to change this knockout to the silhouette alpha. Then what I do, I've got this thing here, it's hidden here. All I do is I select this layout, this pop-up here, and choose publish. And now it joins, if I select the layer and then I go to project, publish parameters, then what I've done is I've added it as the first item in this list. This is the list. Essentially, this list here is the same as the list I showed before, saying layout and the number of screens. Remember, it's a place to keep these things.
$50 application. Yes. $50. That's all I'm saying. Just $50 to do this.
So
if only it was 100.
Yeah. If only.
By the way, you notice there's a problem down here that this is covering over. It's being covered here. So what can I do about that? This is just a thing. I can add something to a widget after it's been created. So I can get this thing, this layer, and I can change its opacity. So first what I'm going to do, most of the time, the opacity of this URLs is going to be visible apart from in one case. Mm-hmm. Again, I get this opacity thing and add it to the layout, which I named as layout. And in this one case for 1 plus 3, it's now appeared that the opacity of that object has now appeared here, and I reduce it down. Just there's a slight bug sometimes in Motion that it won't let you change the parameter when you've just added it. So sometimes what you need to do is go to another one and set the value, and then go to 1 plus 1, and then go to the layout that I've chosen, whichever one I was actually working on. And now I can actually reduce the. Right. So what I did is I added that parameter later on to the layouts thing. So my layouts thing started small, and then I kept adding and adding and adding things, and then it just gets longer and longer because it starts off like that. You just add things to it as and when necessary. Yep. So that's a very long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, it's incredible. Carmi Vines ago asks, what made you pick Motion versus After Effects? Have you tried Blackmagic's Fusion as an alternative?
In this case,
pretty well been answered.
I think the thing is that I started, got Motion in 2004, 15 years ago, 16 years ago when it was.
And you
created,
came from Director? You had used Director before?
Yeah, so I use Macromine Director. tested the one with Macromedia and Direct VideoWorks Interactive and all that kind of stuff back to 1991, 1992. But the problem with motion is that when I first got it, I didn't really get it. I kind of tried it for a few times over the first year, didn't get it, couldn't quite manage it. Only in 2011 did I finally get this part of motion, because suddenly I was making templates for Final Cut Pro. And that made the actual project simpler in a weird sort of way, because instead of it being a 2.5 minute animation,
we didn't give you
complicated things.
We didn't give you the real payoff. Is that all of this can be published to Final Cut, where all you see is those layouts.
So what they would see in Final Cut would just be this thing here saying that, and they could switch out, and then they could actually use
change the names.
And then the idea is that I would add this text box, so I can get this text here, publish it directly. And then the idea is that then the person can, when somebody says, hey, could you change the URL? And then all I have to do is change it here in one place and then choose.
And the editor can do that. The editor doesn't need to know, like I didn't need to know anything about any of these things to make this work. I literally do the drop downs and change the names and it's done. Hit export. Like I don't have to figure out what layer it's sitting in or where it's hidden or whether all that stuff is stuff that I didn't have to do to figure all of this stuff out. I just had this, I just had those text documents and the layouts, and that's all I have to deal with.
So you really have to think about who your audience is. Do they know motion? Do they know Final Cut? If they don't know, and essentially.
And again, when you're trying to think about whether your school or whether your corporation is what they're using, and I know that you can talk about shared resources and everything else, but just think about how if all the teachers could have something really nice and that did all the things that all they needed to do, or all of the people in a corporate environment just have things they can throw into their editing package and make those adjustments, it'll all look the same. It has a central design and they don't have to know how to do it. It's a super powerful piece of what was going on. Jan Landy asks, how long did this motion project take you to create, and can we see how the motion actually plays? I don't think this one had motion, because that's my fault.
No.
He had all the motion. I said I don't like motion.
Yeah, so it took me, the initial version with the initial layouts probably took me about 45 minutes to an hour to make. Because maybe a bit less than that, because I kind of had all those. Sorry.
He had a sandwich in the middle of it. It was one of those things.
I would have had to have started in February, and it wouldn't be right.
Yeah. But this is why I hire Alex to do stuff. It's because it's fast. So yeah. So Don Modine asks, in Manchester, Connecticut asks, can you have a video feed automatically compress to fit in each box?
Well, you kind of can do that in the case of motion, because what I would do is that I can make it so that these are different videos playing in Final Cut.
Drop zones.
Yeah, so essentially motion doesn't do live video. It doesn't take in multiple sources. Essentially what you would do is you can, so essentially what I could do is I can make it so that if you, so at the moment in the Final Cut timeline, you would see this thing saying that which layout it was, and you could put in whatever text you like in here. But what I could do is add it so that you could say, okay, which of my video files in my video clips in Final Cut do I want to put here, here, or here, or here, and just pick ones that I want to play out. So this is not a system for live shows at the moment, not yet.
Now, one thing that and the problem that I had in Mad in the Kitchen, this was not Alex's fault, it was this Alex's fault, not that Alex's fault, is that I didn't get the frames quite right because I was putting them underneath this and I couldn't quite see where I was cropping off. And so one of the things that we're gonna work on adding to this document, and then also to the desktop screens within our system, is a grid so that I can quickly scale and move a live video output in the ATEM so that it lines up with the grid that we put into here. Like we'll have like a turn grid on, turn grid off kind of thing, where I can lay everything out relatively quickly is going to be the next piece of this. Go ahead, Chris.
I don't know. I don't know what this would be, but in my mind, I know how drop zones work in Final Cut, and I know how, I'm learning more and more as I buy more of these ATEM things, how it works. Imagine a drop zone that you could say, take this feed, take this feed, take this feed.
I think that the drop zone in the XML could do that. Like, I think that the data there, you could go in and finger it out and, you know, like, go grab it and put it into you could write something that would go into a motion file.
Yeah.
Grab that information and hand it to the switcher.
And people are clearly doing this kind of stuff with Companion and just keeping track of everything in their head. Like, okay, this has to go here.
Because there's a thing in just macros which people are using to make animated transitions between things, and they base their coordinates on 0 to 16 by 9. Essentially, every single shape of your source video is based on coordinate system, and the idea is it should be possible to convert the way that just macros does it into the motion coordinate system based on the XML. So yeah.
Go ahead, Courtney, real quick. We're going to start moving through questions.
Well, I don't know how quick, but so if you're using this as a super source overlay in the Extreme, do you then have to create a layout in the Extreme that crops if your windows are not 16 by 9? Do you have to automatically crop each video and layer it so that if they overlap, the right one shows, and then save that as a layout in the ATEM? And then coordinate that with the overlay, and does it save out that graphic overlay for the super source?
It saves it out. It knows where to go for it. So you're either in your macro, you're either dragging something from the media pool into a media. Well, you're grabbing a graphic and putting it into the media pool. Or what I do with Mad in the Kitchen, or what I did the first time, just because I didn't know what I was going to do, is they took off all 4 media pools in my constellation, and I didn't. So my script only had to go to the media pool, go to media 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't have to go in and grab one and move it. I won't do that again. That had a bunch of issues with it. So you can define all of that. You still have to have the graphics where it doesn't know what the graphic is. It just knows that it goes to well number 3, moves it into the media pool, and then moves everything else around, and the cropping and everything else. And you have to make sure that you move every parameter that you want to remember, because if you don't move all of the parameters that you want, a lot of times I'll set it up and then I just touch every one of them. I just touch, I move it a little bit, move it back to make sure that it saves that parameter. Otherwise the ATEM will just save what you changed. And that becomes, I understand why they do it, but you have to think about that a little bit. Next question is from Tyler Darlington from San Diego. With that motion template, is there a way to animate the movement of windows between layout looks?
Well, I could animate that in motion, but the problem is they would be hard to get it into the switcher,
right?
And to get the switcher to move its sources to match what I'm doing. So that's the catch.
And again, I think that's something a plugin we could figure out a plugin that would eventually tie those two together, which would be super cool. Charles Klein says, "Great work, Alex. Coming from After Effects myself, what 3D capabilities do Motion have? Camera, 3D objects, 3D layers?" We won't be able to show it that much. We'll just let him know.
It's a 2.5D, like After Effects of 2002. It's essentially the same as that. So you can set up cameras. You don't really have depth of each layer, apart from paths can have 3D depth. So you can move objects through 3D paths or stroke 3D paths in 3D space. So it's a bit like that famous plugin everyone was using 20 years ago in After Effects. I came from After Effects, so I know what you're talking about. But you've got multiple cameras, and you can switch between cameras, and you can make cameras follow objects and flow around things and have particles in 3D as well. So the particles can be in 3D, and there's also 3D text. And of course, you can 3D models, OBZ. I can't remember.
USDZ is what you can import into it. The problem with the models right now, at least what I've tested so far, is they don't anti-alias along edges. So geometry edges tend to see a little bit of stair-stepping, which makes it really great for education or really great for presentations and not really great for broadcast. So that's the problem with them at the moment, is that oversampling in the renderer, which should be something that can be fixed because it's perfectly done with the text. Not that I'm bitter. Anyway, so Jan Landy said, "How do you pre-plan the building of this motion template? Thoughts, notes, etc."
Essentially, I knew that I had these different layouts and I had the graphics already made. It's because essentially it was easier to get those 30-point pixels exactly right and scale them up in Illustrator. So I wanted to get that grid working perfectly, because I knew that because of the math of 16 by 9s there's going to be a point when there's going to be fractional pixels and stuff like that, and I knew I could get them down to totally, completely accurate inside Illustrator, because I could just go to wireframe mode and then butt everything up. But it is possible, obviously, to make all these shapes and do all these graphics in motion as well. So once designed in Illustrator, I could recreate that, and then I could actually make it so that the shapes are animated, and then the thickness of the lines all change over time and animate, and even they can automatically align. I could select the 3 shapes and say, okay, click a button, and then they'll align, of course, and distribute across what I'd want. It was just to do it quickly. I just thought I might as well take these Illustrator things. It's quicker to generate these things in Illustrator, and as opposed to recreate a thing that we had already agreed looked correct.
Go to Chris, and then Ken, and then Courtney.
Yeah, I'll say that Alex, Mr. Gollner, the fact that you started with that 30 frames and the grid, making the grid in Illustrator is truly brilliant, and it's like it speaks volumes about how your mind works, and I really appreciate that in you.
Good,
thank you.
Which is funny, because the way I do it, and when I'm laying out super sources, which have never been stacked up, but I lay out super sources in motion, is I do everything with replicators. So I have to admit, I don't do the math. I go, I need 3, and then I start spreading them out. Like until they, and I sit there and squeeze them up and down until I like the way that they look. And so everything for me is all dynamic, with all of that, so that I can just keep moving it around, as I'm working. But I can see how that it's not as precise. Go ahead, Ken. Which is funny for me to be less precise. Ken, and then Courtney.
Thanks for that demo, Alex. Because I build everything, I design everything in vectors. So seeing that, because the live part of the logo I made in Affinity Designer, but now seeing that, so I'll just download it and put motion. Because if it's vector based, it's easy for me to translate and just build it in motion, because
right.
we're everything we're doing is for the video, and then easily then to take that, because it's all vector based, and make that, adjust it for the website, because that's the easy part, so thanks for that. That's now, okay, I now do video graphics. I don't start using motion, but I will be in touch. I think
there are some gotchas though. The paths and stuff like that are, and translating from Illustrator to motion is not straightforward.
No,
there are tools for that sort of thing.
Okay, because what I'd look to use would be paths that the ATEM does, and basically work backwards from the ATEM, what the ATEM can do, and then, because if that's the lowest common denominator, how ATEM does motion, then it's design based from that, I would.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Ken was hitting part of my question. Is motion bitmap based, or is it vector based? And then the other question is, which he hinted at, is do you run into problems if it's bitmap based in converting from Illustrator, which is all vector, to accuracy of conversion to bitmap? And are there half pixels that show up and things that if you try and replicate things that
well, the thing
scale exactly correctly?
So motion is vector based, but vectors don't have the variety that you might be hoping for. And they say round rects work in a slightly different way than they do in Illustrator. And there's lots of little slight things like that. But essentially, it's as accurate as any vector based application from the point of view of being able to set pixels to 3 decimal places of anything. And because essentially, one template is designed to work at any resolution. So the idea is when you do it in motion, Apple set it up so that if you do a thing that works in SD and that same templates you did 4:3 at 8K, it would still look perfectly fine and perfect at a larger size. You have to worry about setting the initial resolution as long as the proportions are correct for your screen.
But you're always exporting them as bitmaps or PNGs to bring into the graphics engine of ATEM, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Attila from Ocean Shores, Australia asks, I have a motion file with different aspect ratios stored in the snapshots. I want to output all aspect ratios via compressor preset or a droplet. Is that possible? How would you attempt to quickly export vertical, square, landscape versions from a single motion file?
And there's no real way of automating it. You've got to set the different snapshot and then you've got to export, unfortunately. Compressor doesn't, although compressor will take a motion file and export, it'll just take whatever snapshot was last set as being the one that it exports in terms of knowing what dimensions to do, unfortunately. And as you know, the catch, of course, with motion files is the fact that if you set up your template to be 1080 pixels high and 1920 wide, then when you do the vertical one, that's going to be 853 wide by 1080 high. In other words, it'll do 9:16 proportionately. All it'll do is make things narrower. So unfortunately, it is non-trivial to get it to tell compressor, oh, by the way, as well as using this motion file, scale up the vertical side to 1920, because essentially inside it's 1080. Sorry about this. This is actually motion trivia.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Keenan Campbell says, what would these services cost to set up a initial super source graphics in USD, of course? I think it depends. I can tell you that because of Alex's speed, I can tell you from personal experience, he's one of the most efficient people to hire to do this stuff, because you get a highly technical document as fast as anyone out there, depending on, at any price. So I'd recommend contacting him in Discord. I mean, I'm just saying that as far as laying this stuff out, you give him something and he gives you back that in motion, all with templates and everything else like that. It's amazing. So I'd highly recommend him. Roscoe says, what size screen do you design your graphics for? What would you adjust for tablet or phone viewing?
Well, aesthetically, yes, you would. I've been doing things like this for, in terms of branding for the BBC, in which they don't, essentially the designs are designed for online use. So it's like a YouTube video that you don't expect to be full screen. So you kind of have to design the type being a little bit larger than it would normally be to be comfortable on a TV screen, because you know it's quite likely if somebody's skimming past or going on a timeline that your YouTube video is going to be 2/3 of the size of the screen at most, effectively. So if you see in terms of how big the screen is relative to the screen it's on, you sometimes have to design things to be a little bit bigger than they normally would be, so they can be legible and can draw people in. So it's that's a kind of design rule associated with social. Weirdly enough,
for a lot of the stuff that I build, I design everything so it'll work at 2160p, because I know that someday I might go to 4K, and then but I also view it at 640 by 360 because that's the lowest, the lowest resolution, and make sure I can still read it. And it has to fit those two things so that it's generated at a really high resolution, but able to be read at a small resolution, which is a little complicated. Charles said, "What's your favorite feature in Motion?"
I would say publishing aspect ratio stuff, but also just choosing exactly the right parameters to show to an editor, because editors chose to be editors. They didn't choose to be motion graphics people. And the whole point of what I'm doing is hiding all that stuff, as opposed to giving them every single option. Like a motion graphics person would say, but surely they'll want to change this, and this. And they're essentially trying to recreate a motion graphics app in one single template. So I love being able to just keep it just the tool they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Ash said, "Are the motion templates for this masterclass available in Discord for us to learn and experiment with?"
Sure. I mean, I can simplify.
We'll get something up. What I think we're going to do is I'm going to try to persuade Alex to do like a Saturday lab with us at some point when we have a little time, and if he's open to that, and we'll do it. Yeah, like we can all do it together, and we'll get the files out to do that. There was a lot of interest in that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Might be interesting as well to do something like one of the Raspberry Pi sessions where people start from a blank slate.
That's what I think we would do, is just build everything up and give everybody some raw graphics or some raw designs, and have them all build stuff and ask questions and everything else. I think that labbing this out would really get a lot of people over the hump on figuring out how to do it. And I think it would sell a lot of copies of Motion, because it's just like when you see it, you're just like, oh, I need that. Jason Robert Shaw says, Is broadcast title safe still an issue? I get scared about putting content close to the edges and the corners. Note that it seems that every platform adds interface elements over to the content, especially the edges, and some crop down too. Maddening.
Crazy thing is that certainly the BBC at the moment want things to be 14:9 safe and a little bit more. Because the UK government fund the BBC, which means they know there's going to be some retired folks out there with CRTs that are going to be 4:3. So essentially, if you put the 16:9 on there and you crop the left and right sides a little bit, then you end up with 14:9. And of course, BBC News, they have a standard stuff. They've got their stuff going around the outside border of everything, so you have to keep that safe. So weirdly enough, for certain broadcasters, 14:9 safe is the thing for BBC, but then for people like Sky and ITV and other people, they do normal TV safe for the stuff that they do for 16:9. But it still does apply.
I know for our graphics, we go right to the edge. We just do streaming, so I don't really interact with broadcast as I try to avoid it as much as I can, and just because it's so constraining. And so we go right to the edge at 16:9, except for the fact that we have overlays that are, and we have to change them all the time. Like my current ones aren't accurate, but we have overlays for Facebook and YouTube and everything else for exactly what you were talking about, the stupid little bubbles and all the other things that show up. And we have to have safety areas so that we know where we can't put graphics so that they conflict with the stuff that's being comped over top of our stuff, which is, as a creator, what I really want is a button that just says no on-screen graphics. Like just turn all that, like all that off. And I haven't been successful at lobbying for that. Mike Henderson asked the last question. I like how you use black boxes to measure spacing. Is that a common practice or just something you developed?
I'm sure it is. I'm guessing it's a common practice. It's just a thing I can quickly do. And I once I came up with my grid, I just thought, okay, I'll do that. So maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Courtney.
Does it have movable rulers like Photoshop does, so that you can slide in a ruler to get spacing correctly?
Not like that. Not in terms of a ruler that's actually right in front of you. But you can set positions of things in a similar way. Essentially, each group has its own coordinate system, which can be very useful. So essentially what I can do is make it so that the text associated with a frame and the frame is essentially, it's its own coordinate system in which the center of the screen is 0, 0. It's hard to explain. And then essentially what I can do is get those screens and then distribute them horizontal in their own group. So grouping is really useful when it comes to coordinate systems conceptually, because essentially what I can do is I can say, from the screen's point of view, in other words, of the source saying, the lower third and the border and the knockout thing, that's one group. And I can then treat that as a single object, which I can move around. But within that group, it's got its own coordinate system. So that kind of helps with what you want to do. There is align and distribute within motion instead of distributing horizontally, but setting exact values. Yeah, you might sometimes actually have to make your own rectangles of the size you want and to stick them on the screen and position where you want, and just to be absolutely sure about what it's doing.
Do you have guidelines that you can snap things to, or?
Yes, absolutely. The thing is that there is a trick as well to make sure that as motion is vector based, it really likes lots of things have blurry edges because they're never exactly on a pixel boundary. But there is a trick in motion to make it so that it's always a hard edge, even if everything's like a half a pixel. So there's a trick to make things, if they're rectangles, always hard edged, which can be useful. Also, it can be a bad idea depending on what you're doing.
We'll continue this conversation in the post show. Thanks for great work from our producers. Fantastic questions. You really helped us run the show today. So thank you so much for that. And hopefully we'll see. We really have gotten. We were talking about this in the pre-show, as we've gotten to this point where there is this symbiotic relationship between the producers and the panelists. It was Victor was talking about the fact that he said, I just have to decide where I'm most useful today. I think I might be most useful on the panel, or I might be the most useful in as a producer. And I hadn't really thought of it in that way, but it really is. It's a back and forth, and we really do depend on the producers to not only ask those questions, but the comments and the questions, and adding to the answers and everything else in the chat all enriches the program. So we want to thank everybody that's part of that process, and I want to thank the panelists for another great day. Always seems to be a little better than the last one. It's amazing. And thank you for Alex for both working on the Mad in the Kitchen thing, but also walking us through literally, that's the most. I mean, you can see why I was like, this is the most advanced thing I've ever seen. I don't even know how this works. And so when I don't know how it works, I mean, I've been using Motion since before it was released, and I used it mostly for visual effects. You know, we had built plugins that made it do something that it's not designed to do. So in motion graphics, I'm still learning. And anyway, great, incredible work, Alex. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll get a lab. We'll get a lab together for everyone. All right. See everybody in the post show.